Okay, so in this last tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make your own mockup. So mockups are really important because they allow you to imagine what your work looks like in the real world. And that's a really good test of what you're doing. It turns it from this kind of abstract design that you do on your computer or a piece of paper that you print out into something that's actually in the world. You can get mockups, so you can do a search. So this one I got from, it's called Free Mockup World. One of the things that I always find challenging about this is they're super spammy. So if you wanna get this Photoshop file, you've got to basically sign up to get a bunch of emails or pay for them. Paying for it is okay, but what I want you to think about is think about how you can actually make these on your own. So I've taken their image without all the Photoshop stuff. I'm going to show you how you could take your own photo. So you could shoot a photo of where your poster is going to go, and then you can turn it into a mockup. So just building on what I've been showing you already in this course, how you can do that by placing your design into here. And in the end, you'll end up with something like this. So you end up with your poster in the space with some pretty simple tools. You can do quite a bit of work to make it look really realistic by adding like reflections and playing with the light on the surface. But we're just going to keep it really simple, and I'll show you how you can take this and turn it into a mockup. So I'm just going to take the one here that I've already done and group it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to trace the outline of the place where you're going to put your photo. So to do that, you can use, you can almost always use a vector tool. So the pen tool, and you can just zoom in and click through this. So just using this pen tool. And what you can do is you can make sure that this is set to a path, and that'll make it a little bit easier to work with than if you do a shape. And if you don't have these palettes opened in Photoshop, you can go ahead and open them here. So you can open your paths palette and your, you won't need your channels palette, you just need the paths palette and your layers palette. And what you want to do is you want to try and add a little bit of an edge to these things, because this piece of this metal frame actually has an edge to it, even if it's white. So you want to make sure you add that in there. And this, you're going to find this pen tool works pretty similar to what you're used to from Illustrator. And you can do it pretty quickly and then just go back and change it. It's the nice thing about working with vectors. It's pretty easy to change after the fact. There's a bit of a reflection here on the metal, but again, like fixing those things takes a bit of time. And with this tutorial, I'm just going to do it pretty quickly. And again, could go back and fix these. So any mistakes you make, go back and fix them afterwards. And go back and fix it. I'm just using, so I'm going to turn on my keystroke. So I'm just using the control key here to switch to the arrow tool. And then I can just hover over the last point and start drawing again. And I'm just scrolling with my trackpad. And so here, and if this is, if you feel comfortable working in Illustrator doing this, don't feel like you have to watch this whole part of the tutorial. But I do show you how to work switching back and forth from Illustrator to Photoshop, so that part is worth watching, unless you really know how to do that already. So I'm going to scroll all the way up here and add another point. again, I'm just leaving a little bit of an edge, a few pixels that are just going to make it seem a little more realistic. And there we go. That's pretty good. So now this is going to be my mask. So I'm going to go here to my pass, and I'm actually going to save this. So I'm just going to call it in-situ 2. So this will be the mask that I use for cropping my poster. So one thing, I could just go here and I could actually place my poster in here. But what happens in Photoshop is that there's two types of smart objects, and one is a vector smart object, and one's a native Photoshop smart object. And they both work a little bit differently. They give you more, the Photoshop one gives you a little more flexibility. So I'm going to actually start by drawing a new shape here. And this one's going to be a shape. So I'm going to just draw a shape over top of this. That'll be the poster. And I'm going to make it 11 by 17 because that's the size that we're working to. And I'm going to give it, I'm just going to draw it right across here. I don't know if you guys can hear my cat in the background. She's driving me a little bit crazy today. So this is a native Photoshop vector object. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 110 pixels by 170 pixels. And that'll be in proportion to the final poster size. And then I'm going to give it a solid fill of red. And I'm just going to scale up, holding my shift key down to approximately the size of the nearest part of this frame. I'm going to take this, turn it into a smart object. And all that does is it's going to give me the flexibility when I do place my vector object in there, again, to control how I transform it. I'm going to take this and I'm going to give it a, reduce the transparency just so that I can see what I'm doing. Just see through, just want to approximately get to the right size. And I'm going to actually nudge this over a little bit. I'm just using my arrow keys to nudge it over. Command T to get my free transform. And then I'm just going to scale it. So I'm going to hold the shift key down so I don't, so this is where Photoshop gets weird. Sometimes the shift key constrains proportions, sometimes it doesn't. So, so that transforms the width. So that's like foreshortening it. So if in your drawing class, when you study how an arm gets foreshortened, right, when you look at something on an angle, the length gets shortened. I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to choose distort. And here you can see we have all these choices here. I could have used perspective, but it's a little bit wonky. So I'm just going to choose distort. And then I can just grab each corner and drag it down. And I'm just going to get it close. And here's where the idea of bleed is important. So you guys have created your posters with bleed. Same thing happens here. When you, basically the frame is trimming your poster. Hit enter. And that gives me approximately the right shape for this. And now I'm going to go and make this 100%. So change this to 100%. And I'm going to go here to my pass. And I'm actually going to go to my layer and go layer, vector, mask, current path. So that took this vector path that I drew and it made this the mask for my poster. I'm going to name this poster. And now I'm going to do that thing that I've shown you guys a couple times where I'm going to double click on, so I'm not going to double click on the mask, I'm going to double click on the smart object. And this brings me into this mode where I'm editing the smart object. I'm going to actually go and I'm going to look at this so I can see them both at once. So true up vertical. So here is my Photoshop file, and here is the smart object where I'm going to place my poster. So here I'm going to go File. So here in this smart object, I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. And I'm just going to grab a poster that I did years ago for when I worked on a Westminster Savings bank account, a bank that is now merged with Prospera Credit Union. So this was a campaign that I worked on a few years ago. You can see that my poster isn't quite the right size, so I'm just going to drag this up a little bit to make sure it just fits in the smart object. And I'm going to hit enter. And here you can see, this is interesting because we have created another smart object. And this smart object is a vector smart object. So what I can do is I can actually go to Illustrator. So here I have my Illustrator window open. I'm going to actually go back to this Photoshop file. I can actually double click on this and I can open up, and that opens up this Adobe Illustrator file in Illustrator. And this is, it's like similar to in Photoshop where it's this round trip thing where I can make changes to this. I could change the color of it. So I could change this, let's say I want to change this to red. Okay. And this messes with my illustration. What I'm going to do is just to make it easier for me, I'm actually going to make a swatch on the side here. So I just want to show you how this works. So I can go and I can change the color here, just like I showed you. I change this to, I can save it. And now when I switch back to Photoshop, it is actually updated here as well. Undo that and save it. And this time I'm going to close it and go back to here. That's updated. I'm going to save this one here. I'm saving the smart object, and you can see right away it places it inside the scene. So I have my embedded Illustrator file, and it works better with an Illustrator file than a PDF, because the PDF is going to open up in your PDF software, whereas the AI file is going to actually open up in Illustrator. One more thing I want to do to this is I want to go in, I just want to add a shadow around here. You can see that in the Mockup file they did the same thing. They have the shadow on the inside that just makes it feel a little bit more realistic. The other thing that they have here, and you can't really see it in this Mockup, but they have a reflection there. So those kind of things really add to the realism of your Mockup. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how you can add a really quick shadow on the inside of this frame here. So I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to go to Inner Shadow. You can see right away it added this shadow along the inside of the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to modify that a little bit. So don't need quite as much. And maybe even darken it a little bit. But you can play around with this. What you don't want to do is make it too obvious, because if you're adding too much of these effects, then it becomes obvious that you added this effect and kind of breaks the illusion. So that's a really quick one. If you want to go in and add a reflection here, this one would actually be pretty easy to add, because here we have the beginning of it. I wouldn't worry too much about this one, but this one here could actually really add a lot to it. So the way you could do it is just by, again, just take the pen tool and reflection. It looks like it comes out about right here. Okay, so I have to make sure that I'm not drawing on my mask. I'm going to make sure that I'm drawing with a shape. And you know, people don't really follow this very closely, so you can actually really just make up whatever you want here. Obviously, the closer you are to the original, the more realistic it's going to be. But when it comes to reflections, it's not as critical. What you can do is change this to a. Start by changing it to a white fill, and I could actually. I'm going to make it a gradient. So I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to add a gradient. And gradient tool is a little bit complex, but what you want to do is you want to make sure you're working with white. And here too, white. And so what we can do here, again, make sure this is white. Okay. And so what we can do is we can make one end what we do here, select this one and select this one, select this one and select this one. So here we have an opacity of 0. So that's the top. So we want to flip that. So I'm going to make it a negative 90. And let's make this first one 20% to start. And then this last one here. And here's where I'm going to make this 10%. So it's really slight. You want to make it pretty subtle. And I'm going to go, I think that looks pretty good. And I can change it if I need to. It's probably a little bit too much. Let's see here. So gradient fill. First one is 10. And the last one is 20. Let's make this 10 and 5. So that's a little more subtle. Gonna go okay. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually group these together. I'm gonna call this reflection. Reflection. And I'm gonna group these together. Call this in-situ poster. And then I'm just going to take this vector mask that I made for the poster and I'm going to drag it up onto the group. And that is going to, apply the mask to both. I'm actually going to do one more thing here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to make a smart object out of it, and I'm going to add a little bit of a blur on it. Just to soften that edge a little bit. Okay, and it's okay that it doesn't line up perfectly because, you know, the frame and the glass and that might not be aligned. And if I feel like it's too much, I can even soften it further, just change the opacity of it. So that's, you know, added a couple of things to it. So a shadow and a shadow, and you know, you can play with this endlessly. So just added a shadow and a slight reflection to it, and I think that really adds to the realism of this placement. So go ahead and do this, and this is going to be part of your submission. I'm going to send both the digital file and the mock-up to Hubbub, and they're going to put something up on the website. So, so what I would do is I go ahead and save this. I'm going to close. So again, I'm going to close this one here, and I'm going to save this. So file, save as. And I'm going to include the JPEG on with the tutorial. But you're welcome to use whatever image you want. So if you want to use your own image and create it, or if you want to work with, just find a mockup file, that's fine too. But it's important that you take this thing that you've crafted and you put it into the real world to just give this illusion of what it would look like when it is in the real world. So, so once you've saved it and saved it as a PSD first, this. Save, and then I'm going to save it as a PSD, save a copy as a PDF. And here's where you can optimize it. Just, I'm getting some pretty big PDFs posted on Blackboard, and it really slows down my marking, so it takes me a little bit longer to mark. So if you would be kind enough to make sure that you reduce the just optimize it a little bit so that it's just a little bit easier for me to access it, I'd appreciate it.